We here at the Real Agents of Change have picked the right partner. We have Realty Gift Fund here to tell us about yet another charitable gift of real estate. Bruce, who's the donor? What's the deal about, and who's getting the money?
The donor was a young man from who I believe is in the tech world in Silicon Valley, and bought himself a house 20 years ago before he got married. And the house was unusual. This is kind of a small deal, but this is how these donations work. It's over the water in a bay of a town called Clear Lake, California, a little thin peninsula that acted as a driveway to a bunch of residences that were peeled off on the edge of the peninsula, but actually all sat in the water on stilts. And he gets married, and his wife goes and visits the house with him and says, "I don't ever want to come back here again." You know, it's a typical story of a guy who buys a house who thinks, wow, this is kind of romantic, and you know, in my single life, this is really going to serve me well, and I've got my little canoe and I can do what I do. And he gets married, and she's very smart. She's a Silicon Valley engineer as well. And she just said, "Hey, look, we have a great life in Palo Alto. We're never going to go there. This house is just not, I'm never going there again." So Steve Katzman, very, very, very nice gentleman, was introduced to us by the Stevenson School, which is a private secondary school in, I want to say Malibu or Carmel, something like that.
So they are the nonprofit.
Oh yes, it's a private 501c3. It's a private school, small school. You know, it probably has 500 students. And so, you know, they operate, I think, rather handsomely. They have a high net worth clientele that send their kids there. But fundraising for a school, I served on the board of a private school, and meeting the financial needs of a private school like that is challenging, because one of the things you're always trying to do is bring in students to fill out the student body of people who can't afford your tuition. So you're always trying to add to the coffers so that you can offer these otherwise very talented students tuition-free experience. And Steve Katzman loved the Stevenson School, and he wanted to honor them. And so he said, when Emmy said, "Well, I'm not going back to this house anymore," he said, "Good, we're going to give it away." And the Stevenson School put him in touch with us. And it was a very odd deal, because right from the start, what I did was I called the neighbor and I said, "Tell me about the house next door." And she said, "Well, it's a complete disaster. And it's probably going to take, you know, $40,000 or $50,000 worth of work to fix it up. You know, he hasn't been here in a long time, and he just hasn't been keeping the house up." And it was a little discouraging for him to hear this story that I shared with him. And it was a little discouraging for us. But I thought to myself, you know, even in its as-is condition, it's got value. And the Stevenson School would appreciate almost anything coming their way from the effort that we might make. So I hired a broker, a local broker in the area, and she went over and we got a formal inspection made. And indeed, it was going to take about $50,000 to fix this house up to make it worth, you know, what the typical house would be worth in this little peninsula. We decided we didn't want to do that work. We did an evaluation. We said if we spend 50 grand, we might make another 10 or 15. If we sell it as is to somebody who will undertake that work, then they'll make the money for making the effort and investing their cash. We came up with an as-is value of $160,000. And again, not a lot of money, but I thought to myself, if we can create enough money here to send to the Stevenson School, just a check for $100,000, that would mean something to them. So we undertook a listing agreement with the local broker. We stated quite clearly, it's as is, where is, we're not fixing a thing. Listed it for $160,000. And we got 3 offers, starting at 100, working its way up to 130, and then getting one at 155. And the gentleman who made the offer for 155 said, I'll close in 14 days. No inspections, no financing. I just want the building. I just want it. He sort of had the same romantic idea about the property that my donor did. And indeed, we had a last minute wrinkle before we actually closed. Our buyer went away 3 days before closing. He just disappeared. But he wrote a letter and he said, I have somebody else who will buy it and she will close in the same time frame I was intended on closing. It actually took her about 5 days, but she closed at $155,000. And we were prepared. We created $128,000 for other nonprofits. We created $148,000. Our share of the outcome for Realty Gift Fund was $20,000. We had 128 to send out to the nonprofit, out to the Stevenson School. And at the last minute, my donor said, stop. Let's send $100,000 to the Stevenson School. And I have 7 other nonprofits I would like to support by dividing up the remaining $28,000 in checks that range from $1,000 to $5,000. And that closed about 3 weeks ago, and we are still in the process of issuing all those checks because we have to go out and find the actual name of the, these are all educational institutions, ranging from Boston University to Drury, to another private school, to a daycare that's local to the area. We have to go out and find the actual person who's going to get the check, the address, the what have you, and we're working on all that right now because we're issuing a total of 9 checks from this one little deal.
I can just imagine the nonprofit, whether they get that check in the mail, whether a real estate agent walks in and hands it to them, whether that guy walks in and them getting that money that they weren't expecting. What a beautiful blessing.
Well, I'll tell you what, 3 or 4 of these nonprofits are really small. And from my experience, a check of $5,000 is about the biggest check they'll get in the course of a year from a major donor. And so this check is coming to them out of the blue. They have no idea that they are in the food chain here from this donation. So it is going to be, we're going to be very thoughtful about how we do it. We're going to tell them this is a grant from Realty Gift Fund to your nonprofit on behalf of Steve Katzman, who made a gift of real estate to us and identified you as the nonprofit who should receive this cash. It's going to be a wonderful story. I loved working with him. I loved working with his wife, and I loved working with my brokers on this odd little, building on stilts, right? Over the water. So
there you
great
have it.
Story.
Another story, another success, another donation that was handled by professionals and are now distributing $128,000 to all these nonprofits who will benefit. Thanks for the story, Bruce. See you on the next episode.
Okay, thank you, Cammie.